Welcome to Slash Forward. Hey, why is that girl wearing a Hannibal Lecter mask? And what are all of her many gifts? Where did she get them and how does she use them? We're gonna dive in and find out, but before we go deep, we'll have to gently wade through a brief recap of the rich and nuanced story presented in The Girl with All the Gifts, a movie that really just has to be based on a book. I haven't checked yet, but it's just gotta. Stick around till the end when all will be revealed. Let's get to it. We open on a child counting time until lights on, the happiest time in Kitty Prison. She then cordially welcomes her guards and very sweetly reminds them of the proper restraint protocols. Then, on the way down the hall, she greets everyone she sees. The youngsters are wheeled into their spots for the morning meeting, where they patiently wait to receive their 3 units of state-sanctioned education. This primarily involves an intense quizzing of the periodic table, and we learn Melanie is the girl with all the answers. Miss Justino arrives to relieve the sub, which is good for the kids because she's more of a pushover. They're even able to convince her to tell them a story about Greek gods, an action that could risk her getting stuffed in the hole for a week. Melanie's fertile imagination soars as she learns about Pandora and her special box, that, in this case, may represent Melanie's brain. The next morning, we observe Melanie scarf down a fine meal of the juiciest grubs you've ever seen, before going into a food coma. Then she's counting down again, awaiting her standard visit from Dr. Caldwell. The doctor likes to give her little mysteries to sort out, like what to make of Schrodinger's cat, in order to work out if Melanie is special or just mimicking observed behavior. She also asks her to pick a number at random. And the next day, the student who occupied the room of the same number appears to no longer be present. To avoid hard questions about poor Kenny's fate, Justino allows them a free writing hand to see if they can make up some stories. As they work, we get direct confirmation from the guards that they view the children as disgusting little curs. Inside, Melanie appears to be the only child not suffering from writer's block. As a reward, she gets to tell her story about a girl and a monster, which sounds kind of like an amalgamation of other stories and phrases she's heard before. Despite the need for significant edits, it moves Helen to tears and earns Melanie a little head rub. This is absolutely forbidden under all circumstances, and Sergeant Parks reminds her by spit shining his leathery claw and turning some of these little freaks into bigger freaks, in terms of scale rather than volume. But a little soothing balm calms all that right down. Back in her room, Melanie rubs it in that Helen would never touch him on the head, so Parks relieves the others and leaves Melanie restrained for the night as punishment for her sharp tongue. After Helen finishes up recording all the failing grades, she takes a casual walk of the halls and becomes privy to Melanie's situation. She begins to release her, but the scent is too much to overcome and Melanie warns her away. In a rush, Helen slathers on some blocker gel but accidentally leaves it behind as evidence of her visit. To distract from this transgression, Melanie blurts out her next number, which is the number 4, because she's trying to test their mettle. Melanie has a sudden wake-up call that night. Outside of the normal schedule, she's escorted by Parks, but in isolation. This leads to a sequence of novel experiences for her, finishing on an airfield somewhere. She's wheeled for the first time into the open air. As they proceed, we pan out to see that they are in a constant state of ammo depletion. She's taken all the way to the lab Dr. Caldwell uses for tinkering on brains. As a final gift, she reveals that the answer to the cat in the box mystery is you open the box and find yourself. Wow, quantum mechanics truly are so strange. They get her sedated and strap her down before she immediately begins to wake back up. Before they can dose her up some more, Miss Justino bursts in to share her theories about an unspecified fungus thinking for the children. But this doesn't address the differing opinions about whether these are children at all. Caldwell fakes like she wants to talk, but then hits Helen with the bear spray 2 times, just to be safe. She reiterates the necessity of grinding up kiddos to synthesize their vaccine, but almost as soon as they get back to work, the sirens go off. In a moment of rote apathy, her lab assistant gets got. The doctor then destroys their brains, her medical specialty, before leaving Melanie to her fate. Luckily, as a fellow fungal-brained freak, she's effectively invisible to the infected. She's able to get a scalpel and cut loose as her former friend laps up a pool of blood like she's in a pie-eating contest. She then runs out to find the world she barely knew now in complete chaos. With a lack of restraint and structure, she saves her beloved teacher in a a way that comes naturally to her. This puts her into a nap-like state, allowing Helen to carry her through the fray as the stronghold falls to the horde. Only a small group of them come across the right set of circumstances to allow them to escape. And as they head out across the plains, Melanie wakes up to find that they're carpooling with the agent of her destruction. Once they realize she's on the truck, they try to destroy her, but Melanie sends her off to die slow and alone instead. In a twist, after failing to reach anyone on the radio, Caldwell actually explains that she requires the test subject for her vaccine aspirations, so Helen tries to soothe her troubled conscience.
I ate bits of the soldiers.
Yeah, but in a positive way. Also, as they take inventory of the truck, they find a Hannibal mask for her. The plan now is to regroup at the southern base, supply up, then mount a search and rescue mission on their base. Caldwell suggests they stuff Melanie where the spare tire goes, earning her a bitch slap. This is unnecessary, however, because they have a special seat for her up top. When they arrive at a source of fresh water, they take a break to fill up their canteens. They head down to the water's edge, with stealth being a necessity. But then, at the first wind-blown branch, Private Dumbass fires off a volley of unsuppressed rounds. As the boys are busy working their way back to the truck, Helen unlatches Melanie and takes her away. Through some expert marksmanship, Parks is able to make it back. But for his own safety, he makes Dylan wait for a minute with his bullocks out, and he does prove to be infected. In the truck, it's revealed that the girls didn't go far, and that there are very few of them left. Since they're going to have to maintain close quarters, they let Melanie know that her bite will infect people and turn them into hungries. Unfortunately, a stray bullet busted the fuel line, requiring them to hoof it and hope for the best. As they approach London, things do not look good, but they need to travel a populated area if they want any hope of finding much-needed supplies. Since they have plenty of blocking gel to mask their musk, tiptoeing may be all they need to not die. They walk slowly through the ideally spaced hungries while being sure not to challenge their masculinity with direct eye contact. They reach a crowded courtyard, and before they can plot a course, a mommy hungry proves far too precious a curiosity for Caldwell to pass up. But she startles herself, requiring them to move quickly and quietly, using suppressed gunfire to take out the sporadic assailants that snap out of their daze. Caldwell insists their mission statement is to collect data, and she's never seen maternal behavior before in the infected, but they do agree to put their own lives at the top of the priority list from this point on. Once sheltered, they secure Melanie and then split off to ensure they're alone. Melanie, ever thirsty for knowledge, begins badgering Caldwell with questions about what she is and where she came from. Early on, soldiers used to go on supply runs in the cities. They found babies that had been infected prenatally, so they had the fungus but were aware of their environment and behaved somewhat like people. Presuming they had partial immunity, they collected them for research. However, they never forgave them for eating their mommies out from the inside, so Melanie looks like the rest of them, but her brain is most assuredly wrapped up in fungal matter, and Caldwell hopes this is the key to a vaccine. At night, Helen finds clothing for Melanie and asks her to hold out until they can get some food suitable for her palate. Some of them do a little drinking before hunkering down for the night, and Melanie reads Kieran a bedtime story. They awaken to a fungus-laden horde, attracted to the courtyard by the prior day's fracas. Melanie offers to help, promising she will return to them because she doesn't want to be lonely, and mostly, she just wants to strut in her new duds, as the kids say. She ventures out among her kin and finds most of the area around the outside to be clear. She takes only a moment to satiate her hunger with a nice picnic in the afternoon sun. She then explores the surrounding area, finding most of the food to have more fungus than her brain, but she does eventually find a stray dog. She brings it to the center of the party and uses it to draw them off. The group is thankful but still wary as they continue on their way. Eventually, they come to another obstacle and send her to find a clear route. She calls it in via walkie-talkie and patiently awaits their arrival, further earning their trust. Along the way, they find some evidence that the pathogen is entering its next stage of development, bearing fruit. Nature is so beautiful, and this may be Melanie one day. They work their way through the city, now reclaimed by nature, and make further discoveries that this fungus has reached a stage of significant sexual maturity. And this is some sexy shit. Let's just hope none of the sporangium blossom on them. Melanie reveals here that she can smell that Caldwell is sick, so she distracts her with a spore pod, and then they find an emergency lab, so Caldwell shows them the way in. It seems to be in good shape, but as they try to use the radio and think about their nutritional needs, they forget that Melanie is staring at a whole damn snack right in front of her.
I can smell you.
So they let her out to go hunt for some cats, like Alf, remember? You remember Alf, he never goes out of style. We eventually find her tucking into a pigeon, which is a lot better than Kieran's doing, in several ways. Once the hunger edge is off, Melanie goes to hit the library and find some of those fungal children she heard about. Like her, they thirst for knowledge, but have no understanding of books or language. Still, they get by in their own way, waging war against the healthy and waiting out the poxeclips until Captain Walker returns to take them to Tomorrow-Morrowland. Back at the lab, Caldwell reveals that she has sepsis, and they found the lab and its cache of antibiotics too late to help her. She wants to try one more time to synthesize the vaccine before she goes, but it requires pulverizing Melanie's brain and spine. Before she can make her case, Melanie rushes in to warn them that Kieran is in grave danger. Sure enough, he's out minding his own business, following a simple, perfectly innocent trail of canned goods that draw him into a corner store. He's caught perusing the porno mags by a young lass who wants to honor him with the gift of a rat. Despite not wanting it even a little bit, he lets her lead him into a trap wherein they equalize the playing field by slicing up his hammies. His attempts to hold them off with a grenade does no good since they don't speak English or know anything about grenades. Melanie reveals that this tribe of free thinkers know the scent of the blocker gel thanks to their lab hosts. And since he left his radio outside, they have no choice but to let Melanie lead the way to his location with her nose. So she takes them on a jogging tour through town. They arrive shortly after the feast has concluded and find Kieran picked clean to the bone. Melanie emerges to find her people, and she seeks parley. They speak a sort of innate rudimentary language of a sort. Despite her best efforts, she runs into some trouble with the leader, but they let the two work it out, as is the custom. She shows continued signs of novel thinking, and by beating the leader to a pulp, she becomes the most frightening entity in the vicinity. This allows her to claim the adults as her property and spirit them away. When they return, the doors are open and Caldwell is both strapped and masked. She's gassed the interior to knock them out so she may complete her life's work before completing her life. But her hand slows her too much to get the job done. Having to face down her medical fodder, she's forced to explain what she's trying to do and why she needs some of her parts.
You can give her something that nobody else can.
Your brain. And she convinces her to do it for Helen. But Melanie flips the script on her ass, asking her now if she acknowledges that they are children, which Caldwell is forced to affirm. This leads Melanie to question why she then must be the one to be sacrificed, and runs off into the dark with Caldwell struggling to keep up. And also not knowing about the feral children, but she does find out. Melanie arrives at the base of the Tree of Life and sets it alight, busting them pods and sending the spermatozoa floating off into the sky. She finds that Parks came to look for her, and she confirms her conclusion that this is the inevitable next step, and that the world just doesn't belong to Homo sapien prime anymore. She then honors his request for a mercy killing. When Helen wakes up, she emerges from the inner chamber to see the deadly spores drifting on the breeze, and now she is the one who is kept away in a small concealed location. But as time goes on, we see that she is allowed more creature comforts, and that between the two of them, they are slowly educating the bastard children of humanity. There were definitely a lot of little things woven into the movie to bring everything together in a coherent way. It was hard to hit on all of them, so I'll provide that clarification here. In this post-apocalyptic society, humanity's downfall was brought on by some sort of fungal threat. With the plot focusing on this specific time frame, we don't get much indication of how things unfolded at the beginning. Apparently, the fungus attaches itself to your brain and then proliferates, turning you into a little fungus spreader. It's strange that it spreads like a normal zombie virus via bite, because the airborne spores make more sense overall, and it leaves open the question of how patient zero was overtaken. It appears that the violence in biting is specifically to induce spread. If there's no one to spread to, they apparently go mostly dormant, gently waving in the wind and slowly congregating in large open spaces. This congregation allows the fungus to merge and sprout into sexual maturity, developing into a large vine-like plant that grows hard, durable seed pods. If these seed pods burst, it then goes airborne, which is game over for humankind. It's not totally clear how Caldwell knew the pods would respond to moisture or heat, but there were indications that a lot of study and research went on in the early days when their numbers were stronger. Although if moisture is a factor, I'm not sure why a good rain wouldn't have already popped them fungus nuts open. All the biting and dormancy and sprouting was part of the first generation. Women who were pregnant when they got infected gave birth to precious little halfling babies. With the fungal load strained through the placenta, they lived a symbiotic life. They appear to not require sleep, only require limited oxygen, but also exhibit limited brain function. Caldwell and her ilk did not consider them to be human children, suggesting instead that the fungus was just controlling them through its connection to their brains. They seemed like they were unable to exhibit novel thinking. Even so, it's not totally clear why they considered them not children. It seems like they grew and went through normal human development. They came out as babies, so unless they were way older than they looked, it seems like they would have grown up as children do. Despite the desire to bite, they could have been viewed as sick humans rather than human-looking hungries. The first generation of fungal zombies primarily located people through smell, which is why the survivors utilized the scent-blocking gel. The gel was tightly rationed and identified with serial numbers, which is why Melanie tried to distract Caldwell when she found it. They didn't know Helen was responsible for the infraction, but they could have found out. After that, the hungries respond to noise. After that, apparently, they exhibited low-level human responses to social interaction, like facial expression and non-lethargic movement. The children had advanced smell that they were able to use in a variety of different ways. Also, the mobile lab they found was a model that had been deployed early on for field research in a variety of areas. That's why Caldwell was immediately familiar with it. While they were there, they did get word from the southern base they were going to visit. The fences were failing and they were being overrun, which is why things were starting to unravel so significantly. It seemed unlikely that a cure would have any real positive effect since there may have been no one left to vaccinate. But then also, how did the pregnant women get infected? They described entire maternity wards of hollowed out ladies. Did they all get bit? Did they get bit but not turn because the interface between their system and the placental system redirected the fungus away from their brains? How did the babies survive? They didn't really show gifts of strength or agility. Presumably, they were babies and likely preemies. Were the nutrients gleaned from the bodies of their mothers enough to sustain them in one spot until they were old enough to fend for themselves? Why did Caldwell do such a bad job of keeping Melanie unconscious? At the end, when she wakes up from gas, Caldwell surmises that the fungus is metabolizing oxygen for her, so she needs less of it. But she says this like a revelation that she didn't know about prior. But earlier, they used an injection that didn't hold either. If there's a similar metabolization going on, why wouldn't they have known about that part already, since they had performed this procedure before? The gaps in knowledge to create drama seemed unnecessary since there was already so much danger, and Caldwell was otherwise very knowledgeable even about things that we'd have no reason to believe she knew. This movie does a really good job of allowing the revelation of the plot to unfold in a natural and mysterious way, rather than just hitting us with everything at the top. It made for a very intriguing introduction to the world we were visiting that really draws you in. Possibly because of that, and despite some of the longer scenes of drawn-out camera work, it doesn't feel like you're watching a nearly 2-hour movie. The characters were given space to work through their various arcs in logical ways that were consistent with what we were shown to be their motives. It also was based on a strong underlying concept with some eerie imagery. It was reminiscent of Annihilation, but with more specific and singularly focused results for the biological threat. This was based on a book, so fans of the book will likely be pleased. I know that there's information missing, but there always is. That's how I had the feel that it was an adaptation. The final act sort of came together abruptly and felt like it was skimming over a lot of information. However, the author did adapt his own book for the screenplay, so hopefully that resulted in a faithful adaptation. Regardless, these are two different types of media. There are going to be necessary changes to capture the essence of the story within a limited time frame. This was also a fairly good and unique zombie film, which I was not expecting. I honestly thought it was going to be more of a sci-fi testing on kids with superpowers style movie. I think it's worth watching as an addition to the zombie genre that doesn't follow all of the standard tropes and plot beats. It's kind of like a sci-fi young adult zombie film, but with an R rating. Now that we're here, I wanted to congratulate you for making it to the end of the video and affirm that you are a very special person because of it. And before we go, I'd like to give huge thanks to my donors, memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks a growing collection of uncensored movie recaps. And if you enjoyed the video, I would love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.